Wicked. Here we are. Adam Rowe, how are you, bro?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm excellent. I just finished recording another podcast previously with my homeboy Toomey, who's an amazing poet, artist, hip hop artist, just a dude. And we speak the same language. Being, I've been in the rapping. I've been rapping for like 20 years.
Okay.
He's been in it for a similar amount of time. So we just speak the same language and dropping into that flow with you know when it is if you're hanging with someone who's into something that you're into, if you could be surfer or you could be an engineer or whatever it is, you guys speak that same language and
Yeah.
you just have that affinity for one another. And yeah, so I'm feeling great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's great to be in flow with someone basically just tapped into the same frequency.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Talk to me a little bit about you. I know nothing about you.
How did we get connected?
Yasmina connected us.
Okay.
She told
Yeah.
me, Yasmina Jade, also, aka the Blood Witch. She said you should link, because I'm always asking people. I'm like, if you know anyone interesting and awesome and dynamic with something interesting and fascinating to share, link me up with them, because I have this show where I love just talking to people who are interesting, fascinating, who know what they're up to in the world or who have no idea but are working it out. But people who you think I would vibe with and connect with, and people are always suggesting, yeah, you should talk to this guy. This guy's awesome. Or, you should talk to this girl. This girl's amazing. And that's how it flows.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, where do I even start, man? I feel like the way things go these days, you ask me this question 2 weeks from now, you'll get a different answer, right?
100%.
Um, yeah, I'm a conscious artist and I'm a creative catalyst. And basically, I believe that art is a tool for transformation. And I believe that our role as an artist as artist is to bring the new frequency, like the new paradigm in as frequency and translate that into art so that it can be received by people at a really deep level that changes them on like a DNA soul level. And from there, we start to bring in this new paradigm, this expanded awareness, this expanded consciousness that is necessary if human beings are going to survive and thrive on this planet.
And what is your art of choice, like your medium of choice?
A number: filmmaking, and spoken word poetry. So I have a spoken word poetry show actually that I tour. That's where Yasmin and I met the first time she came to my show when I toured Australia. I'll be touring Canada and New York and LA in May. And that's like this blend. It's called Permission to Think Freely. And it is this blend of spoken word poetry, personal development workshop, and it's done in like a ceremonial experience setting. And that's my jam. And basically I think that the days of the traditional ways of learning, the traditional ways of receiving information are slowly coming to an end. People are becoming numb to them. And I feel that in order for us to truly make an impact on this planet, we get to create art. We get to create new ways of getting messages across. And so like I just put out a Facebook video yesterday. It's been out for like 24 hours. That is exactly that. It's taking these deep concepts. This one's specifically about manifestation and the quantum field of infinite potential on a subatomic level, like how that works and how we can use that to create the lives we want to be leading. And I turn that into a 3-minute piece of video content that's elegant and exciting and fun to watch, because I that's what I think the value of art is. And then, I want to answer your question fully. Filmmaking, spoken word poetry, and I'm turning my spoken word poetry show into a full-blown music album right now. I'm in studio 4 days out of the week doing that. And then lastly, I teach people how to open up their channels and utilize the creative process in an entirely different way to do what I'm talking about, where it's not so much about creating out of ourselves, but allowing creativity to flow through us from these higher frequency spaces.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that actually reminds you, I was just talking about this with Toomey, that I grew up with a guy named Gil Scott Heron. This is my mom's ex-partner. He's a poet. He's a dude from, he was quite big in the 70s, I think, as well, 80s as well. And he's the one who taught me how to write lyrics in a way. Like, and he said, he's like, so you're writing? I said, nah, because I used to freestyle a lot. Just freestyling, just whatever would come through, and I'll just off the cuff. And he's like, "Do you want to start writing?" I'm like, "What? I've never written before, but how do I go about it?" And this is a guy who's written album after album, after poem after poem, after book after book, and he said, "Well, just listen." He's like, "If you just listen, you just like listen." And this is actually something that has been showed to me by other masters in their field, like philosophy. I used to attend a philosophy class and talk about quantum mechanics and all sorts of stuff. And Neil Wagner was, I think, his name, and he might not have been Neil, but it was definitely Wagner. And he would say, "Don't meditate. Instead of meditation, we want to listen." Because if we're meditating, you fall asleep. If we're listening, we're paying attention. And this was the way that I got taught to write, is just be quiet, listen, and then eventually something will come in and you can grab that and just allow it to come through. And then as soon as your pen stops or like the flow stops, that means you're thinking again. So stop, listen, allow it to come through, and then keep going and keep it flowing.
Beautiful.
So
Yeah.
I think that was a beautiful, it sounds similar to what you're talking about in terms of, rather than trying to create and pushing and urging and, forcing yourself, but just actually being open, being still, being present, and allowing it to come through.
It's 100% the same, with the only difference being, I think we exist in a world full of noise. So there's plenty of frequencies working to come through to you. So when you stop to listen, which ones are you choosing to listen to? And so helping people navigate that, because we're really just we're radio transmitters, right? So we're broadcasting frequency with every word and action that we take, and we're receiving, like you said, we're listening all the time. Our higher selves, our intuition, God, the universe, Allah, like whatever word you want to use to describe those frequencies you're listening to. And the question is, like, what radio station are you tuned to receive the frequency that you're then putting out into the world? And when we can start to attune ourselves consciously to the frequencies and the stations that we want to be broadcasting, magic happens.
And what kind of principles are you like sharing in these events of yours, these shows that you're touring? Is it some principle-based stuff? Is it technique-based stuff? Like what's some of the stuff you share in terms of actually putting to practice the ability to consciously tune into the stations that we want to?
Yeah,
or
well,
even the stations we don't even know exist yet.
Well, with the creative process specifically, so like my show is different because the show is not necessarily about the creative process. It's more about, it's an examination of how we have gotten to where we've gotten to and created this reality, both individually and collectively, the mechanics of that, and then how do we shift? Understanding the mechanics, how do we shift into what we'd like to see? And the course that I teach, I'm actually turning it, I used to teach it as a 1-month group coaching program. And now I'm turning it into a video course so that people can get it and do it at their own pace. And that'll be done in May. And that course breaks it down into 4 modules, 4 steps. And I use a metaphor for those 4 steps. Think of yourself as a garden hose, right? And you have this seed of an idea that you want to plant and water with creative energy so that it blossoms into whatever this idea is. And then let's say it's a fruit tree, so you can take the fruit of your labor. Well, you can plant that seed, and you're the garden hose, that creative energy, that water is going to flow through. The first step is taking that hose out of the shed and unkinking the hose, untangling it, unknotting it. Because if you're like me and you have that hose like in the shed somewhere, you take it out, it's all like wrapped up and nothing's going to flow through it. And so that's like us right now, being full of all our limiting beliefs and our doubts and all the crap that has filled and knotted that flow of energy and gotten in the way. And so that's the first step. And then the second step is connecting the hose to the water spout, which is what I said, learning how to actually tune into the specific frequencies that you want flowing through you. The third step is turning that water on and turning it up. And that's that goes into more your day-to-day. Like, what are the practices that you're doing to actually cultivate, harness, and point and move energy, creative energy? If you're someone who's exploding with creative energy, awesome. But a lot of people, it's like we get to cultivate that and we get to harness, we get to learn how to be with that. And then the fourth and final step is, how does that uniquely go out into the world? So on the end of the hose, are you putting like one of those gun nozzles? Are you using your thumb, or do you have a sprinkler system attached to it? And that's the equivalent of, if it's coming through you, Zulu, if it's coming through you, it's going to be different than if it's coming through me. How do we maximize the unique way that frequency is coming out of you into the world? And that's that 4-step process. And that's how I break it down. And then each of those gets like unpacked, and there's a lot of tools and exercises and understanding that's important to really be able to master that and practice that. But that's something that's really important to me, is starting to give people tangible, grounded ways to apply these esoteric concepts.
Yeah, it's super powerful. So in the past, it was 4 weeks or a month, you said. So I imagine, like, was it a week per element of that? You know, you deepen for 7 days, 7 days, 7 days, 7 days. Is that sort of how you're delivering it with the DIY kind of do-it-yourself videos, or?
Yeah. So the do-it-yourself videos are going to be the same 4 modules. There'll be an introduction and a follow-up also. But I started to realize that there were more people who wanted this information, and more importantly, there were more. If you are someone who starts tapping into the frequency of love, right, and abundance, and you start tapping into those frequencies where we're living in a world where there is no starvation and there is no poverty, and we're really tapping into that, what you create from that is going to help the planet, which means it's going to help me, it's going to help everyone. And so the more people that I can help open their channel and get them pulling that frequency down and grounding it into the earth, the better. And I just can't keep trading my time specifically to do that. So this felt like the highest leverage move.
Well, this is the new nozzle, isn't it? This is hooking your end of your nozzle up to a hydroponic system that anyone can access at any time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The efficiency piece. So for you, are there common, because what's coming through right now is like people who might have a lot of energy coming through, but it might be like maybe too much. Like I hear about manic depressive, this bipolar, and this anxiety and this depression and all sorts of stuff, the symptoms that people are having, maybe from too much energy or not enough of a particular, like it's connected to a dirty connection, or, you know, like, what do you see much of this in your experience, and have you had much experience around that?
There's some mental health issues, I guess is what you would describe them as, that run in my family. And so I've seen a lot of it very personally up close. And I always think to indigenous cultures and indigenous people, because I feel very connected to those cultures, specifically through plant medicine and the work I've done with plant medicines. And those cultures, and a lot of them, schizophrenia, like if someone's having visions or hearing voices or speaking to beings that aren't there, they are then seen as being gifted, being visionaries, being graced with some sort of power or ability that the average person does not have. And they're treated as medicine people or shamans, or they're just treated completely differently. And in
it's like a less of a filter between that source energy. It's like there's less of the veneers on, and it's just like more direct access. It's sort of,
yeah, totally. And so the question becomes like, what is real, right? Because schizophrenics, when they're hearing voices, their brain is responding in the same way that your and my brain is responding right now as we're hearing each other. And the only reason why we say this is normal and this is real is because we assume that if someone else were watching this, they'd also see it. But if my brain responds the same way, hearing a voice of somebody that I could see that you can't see, does that make me crazy? Or does that just mean I'm tapped into some other frequency wavelength, right?
It might be 80 FM to 107 FM. You might be on 110. You can't see it. It's off the thing, it's 112, it's 115 maybe.
And in our society today, if you're hearing voices and talking to people who other people can't see, there's a high probability you wind up in an institution or you wind up homeless, right? And that's a far cry from an indigenous culture that's going to nourish your gift and see it as a gift. And so I think mental illness in general is one of the least understood and maybe most overreacted to. Like we over respond in ways that aren't supportive, because we see it, first and foremost, we see it as an illness. And so I don't know what your original question was around it.
It was more just your experience with it, because I've seen it a lot, and oftentimes I don't necessarily know why I'm sharing something. I'm just open to what wants to come through. So it was just like, what's your experience with it? I have similars in my family as well. My mother's side, schizophrenia. My brother is actually, my baby brother, being medicated at the moment for mild schizophrenia, bipolar kind of stuff as well. So it's close to my heart as well. It's like on the, it's in my field.
Yeah. And I've had depression run through my family, and I've sat with this a lot because there's been a few periods in my lifetime where I've thought maybe I'm depressed, and I went and saw a therapist, and there was a bout with insomnia when I was in college where I was like, there's something wrong with me. And I've often wondered, because it's in my genetics, right? Like it's obviously there. And do I somehow just navigate it differently? Is it my ability to just claim my willpower of, I'm going to do this, and I'm setting myself such a big vision and such a big goal that it gives me purpose, and therefore there's no time to just stop and be depressed. Or do I not have the same thing happening in my brain? I know that when I've gone through those periods, I've definitely felt like I have, and I try and see the common denominator. I think, when we go in the Western society, when we go into a doctor and we're like, yo, I'm not sleeping, and I feel lethargic, and I don't have any motivation, I don't really feel like eating, like, oh, you're depressed. Here is Zoloft or whatever, like here's a drug that you can take for that. And we never stop to think, wait a second, depression is the word that we give to describe these symptoms, right? And so if you're giving me a pill for depression, you're actually giving me a pill for symptoms, not a cause, right? And maybe, yes, there are people who have a chemical imbalance happening in their brain, but even that, is that the cause or is that the symptom? Is that imbalance happening in your brain? Is that because of what's going on in your gut and the gut flora being all out of whack? Is that because of some trauma that you're carrying from sexual abuse from when you were 5? What is actually causing all of this? And I think I don't have the answers, and I definitely don't want to say, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. And so I don't want to have anyone think that I'm saying we're misdiagnosing, but I do think that we have shown ourselves really quick to diagnose symptoms as being a cause.
Yeah, and even as you're speaking, I'm curious to how we've designed this experience to reach a point where we don't want to say, hey, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. Who gives a fuck? This is what I feel is my truth and what I've noticed, so maybe we need to start saying, it's like, well, doctors and scientists have got us this far. Shamanism and magic has got us this far as well. Like, so it's, as a coach, I'm somebody who loves coaching and it comes naturally. I think coaching is like modern day shamanism and magicianship and wizardry, because we're accessing the space to facilitate the growth and the realization of potential, and creating that space to see others in a way that they've never been able to give themselves permission to do so. So I'm like, yeah, mate, we're not doctors and we're not trying to prescribe things, but it's like, it's dangerous ground to talk in. But then you drink a plant medicine, and you not even that, you might even just set up a ritual space and set an intention, or have a coaching session with someone. And even practicing qigong, I'm like, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, but I kind of am scientific with my thinking, and I take a lot of, I try things out myself. I'm very experimental. I'm like, I'll try this or I'll try that, whether it's an ingestion of a substance or whether it's a practice. I'm going to try this. And people come to my class and they say, I haven't experienced anxiety. Like, I've experienced anxiety my whole life, and I've did one of your sessions and I don't feel it. Or I've experienced pain in my side or my leg or my back for however long I can remember since the accident. I've done your class 3 or 4 times and I don't feel it anymore. Like, well, I'm not a fucking doctor, but the cause is being treated. And
yeah, I mean, when we look at how we have, the physical body, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, right? And so we can treat any of those bodies and it affect all the other layers. And what Western medicine focuses on is the physical body and like the chemical response and all of that. And I think that, shamanism and coaching, we're focused on a different body, right? Even if it's a non-spiritually based life coach, they're going to be focusing on your at the very least mental body, and probably your emotional body as well. And then you could go to, a Reiki master who doesn't even talk to you and just does Reiki, and they're focusing on your energy body, and all of it is healthy. I guess when I say I'm not a doctor or whatever, I say that because I do think there's value in Western medicine. I think there's a lot. I think if you get hit by a car and you're laying there with your insides bleeding and your arm broken, like, you're going to want some freaking Western medicine to set that arm and give surgery on your insides. You're probably not going to want that Reiki master to come be like, no, I got you. Like, no.
Get away from me.
Get me the doctor.
Give me a surgeon.
And I know I've heard people who are in spiritual fields who denounce Western medicine. And I think it has its place. I think it is misguided a lot of the time. I think primarily the systems and structures that are set up for the medical system do not encourage doctors to do a deep dive into what's actually going on, because they're not actually incentivized to even heal you. You know what I mean? Like, what kind of business model is successful when the goal is to get people not to come back? It's not set up in that way.
What kind of? I'm sure that you having clients, like I know for myself, it's like with the massage work I've done, healing work, with the physical work, like body work, even the qigong, like coaching as well. My success rate with like having people and setting them on their way, is like, that is actually good publicity. It's actually those people winning and never having to come back is actually going to create more people coming through. So it's like that model does work, but not necessarily with the sick care industry or the healthcare industry, as they call it.
Yeah, because what's the goal is, and so this is my thing, right? With coaching, I have been a full-time coach now for many years, and just recently have completely changed my business model and really no longer have interest in doing a bunch of coaching the way that I was before. I actually am most excited right now about working with some very select clients like I do, and then focusing on my artistry and like going on tour with my show and creating films and being paid to direct music videos and like just art and putting conscious art out into the world. Well, I recognize that my goal with clients is I hope that they don't need me anymore. You know what I mean? I want to teach a man to fish. I don't need them reliant on me. And yes, right now there's tons of people who, when one person is done and they've learned how to fish, someone else will need to learn how to fish. But it is my hope that we get to a spot where it's not necessary. Like, I hope, how amazing would it be if we had a world where we didn't need life coaches because everyone was living a spiritually fulfilled life, and where we didn't need doctors because everyone had amazing health. That's a wonderful world. I hope that we don't need doctors or life coaches, but that's just not our current reality. And I think creating systems of incentivizing people, where what's incentivized is in line with the greater good.
100%. And is this some of the themes that come up in your show, in your art?
Yeah, I mean, my art, as you know, as an artist, right? It comes out of us. It births out of us. It carries our DNA in it. Every line of the poetry or the lyrics, it's us in it. And so if I'm having these thoughts, you can bet that my art carries this messaging in it for sure.
Speaking of which, one of my favorite things to do is to put people on the spot and and invite them into a space of sharing their art, especially if they're an artist, a performer, so on and so forth. So do you have any piece that wants to come through right now that you can share with us?
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, the one that's calling to me right now is a piece called Water is Life. And I wrote this because I didn't know what else to do about the Standing Rock Dakota Access Pipeline that was going on. And I believe in the power of art. And so I wrote this piece, and it's called Water is Life.
Beautiful.
Water is life. I know this is true because if I don't drink, I'll die, but that's a different knowing than because I drink, I live. Give it a minute to let it sink in, because when it clicks, then it shifts all your thinking. Because I drink, I live. That means that my ability to speak the words that you're hearing and your ability to hear me and see me and hear them have been made possible by water. Your mother and father, your sons and your daughters have all been made possible by water. It's not an exaggeration to say that all of creation has been made possible by water. So common sense would indicate that protecting this foundational building block of our world is a necessity. And we should feel blessed to be growing on a planet that addresses the growing list of demands, creating bigger messes we can't understand. It's like we're a child that tests to see how much we can take before we're reprimanded. Well, we are being reprimanded. What we're seeing in the land is letting us know if we keep biting the hand that feeds us, soon we'll have to go. And that means all of us, not just some of us. So someone tell me, please, what is it we are fighting for? To stop polluting the air and the ocean floor? There are dead animals washing up on the ocean shore. They can't even go outside in China without a mask on anymore. We're trading our oxygen for the processed foods in our grocery stores. And that iPhone 12, it's dope for sure. But if it can't breathe and drink for you, it won't be what you're hoping for. So someone tell me, please, what is it we are fighting for? This disease of greed breeds enemies to the very air we breathe. They chop down trees to feed their needs, and they don't care that our mother bleeds because she bleeds black blood. And so when that oil comes, they only cut more deep and they build their pipelines through wherever is cheap, and they don't care that their pipelines leak and our creeks. Are they unaware that our mother weeps? Well, we hear her cries now. Yeah, she's louder than their lies now. And so with gratitude in our hearts for the indigenous people who were the first to start and who paved the way, we're a movement now. We're a movement now. And politicians know it now. That's why they're all fearing this. But even hiding in their white houses and golden towers, you know that they're all hearing this. Let's hope it snaps them out of this money grab that's left them all delirious and reminds them that they're human and we're all sharing this experience.
Yeah.
Because it's scary, this experiment. Seeing how far we can be pushed, how many times we'll keep turning the other cheek, and how long we'll keep covering our eyes. But it should come as no surprise that we've run out of cheeks to turn and our third eye can't go blind. So we see through the games they play and we've let them win for the last time. A paradigm shift is underway and the new rules are old as time. We will protect the land because land grows life from the mountains down into the core. We will protect the air because air breathes life and allows our birds to soar.
Mm.
And we will protect clean water because water is life. And we remember now that life is what we're fighting for.
Yes, it's dope. Dope. I love it. Love all of it. I love multi-syllabic rhyme schemes. So I'm a big fan of.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's a real love of mine, the spoken word poetry art.
Yes, I would love to do some collaboration or something on that, like be part of an event together or something, because it's you know.
Yeah, totally. I wish we had been connected when I toured the show in Australia, man.
Yeah, I know a lot of artists, a lot of spoken word artists, a lot of rappers, a lot of singers. Being in the industry for a long time myself. Yeah, and as well, I love the fact that actors, they like pretty much every actor I know can sing as well. So it's amazing, like that form of expression. It's just super powerful.
Yeah, there's a whole renaissance, man. There's a revival of poetry and spoken word and song, even. Like there's been singing, but now I'm noticing that, like, friends, like, you just show up at a party and like there's a group of people getting together and like harmonizing and just like making music together, and people like drumming on something and someone else playing the guitar and other people just humming. And that's become a common thing for me to see at a lot of gatherings, which some people might say, oh, it's just the people you're hanging out with. And I'm saying, no, it's not just the people I'm hanging out with, because those people will tell you that 3 years ago they weren't doing that.
It's coming through.
Yeah, totally.
It's interesting. I'm curious to know what your experience has been like with. Are you based in the States? Whereabouts are you based?
Yeah, California.
So I'm curious to know, because a lot of people are talking about the changing of whoever's at the head of the state and all of this stuff. And I was over there for a month. It felt quite okay. Like people were going. I was in there in September last year, so I was there for.
That's like 6 months ago, bro. Everything's burned down. You didn't know? You haven't seen it?
So I was there for the Oregon eclipse. So I was there in the eclipse. So I love eclipses, but yeah, like I was cruising around the place, and it didn't seem as crazy as I'd heard from the outside. Being hit on the ground, but not being based there, I don't really have a proper full perspective. So as someone who's based there, what's it been like, with the state of affairs?
That's there's so many layers to that, brother. There's so many layers, but I'll say this. I think that Trump getting elected was in my opinion, probably the best thing that could have happened at the time. Not because it didn't mean that things were going to get ugly, but because it's about time for things to get ugly so people can face off with it. To me, it signified the end of the era of complacency. It signified, it was almost like collectively we all said, you know what, we're going to elect our shadow. We're going to elect all of our collective shadows right into office so we can stare at it. Our narcissism, our racism, our like all of it. We're just going to elect it. And then in that space, what we've done is we've shined a light on it, right? And the shadows can only exist if they stay in the shadows. Shadows can't exist in the presence of light. And so bringing it to the surface for it to be addressed is valuable. I say this all the time, like, imagine how many people right now would just be smoking weed, Netflix and chilling, and instead are marching. They're taking part in these marches. Instead have said, you know what, I need to write a song about this. I need to make a video about this. I need to get on Facebook Live and talk about this. And it's activated people. And we're seeing people actually care. Whether they care on one side or the other side of these political divides is less relevant to me than the fact that people actually care right now. Because people forget that Trump, yes, he got elected, and like half the country voted at all. Right? So you can't be in this country and whine and complain about what happened if you didn't even vote. If you didn't even vote. And so it's activating people. So I think from that standpoint, it's a really good thing, because in my opinion, had Hillary Clinton won, we would have seen more of the status quo. And the status quo isn't working anymore. We've got too much racial inequality. We have too much gender inequality. We have too much wealth inequality, and it's getting to a breaking point. And so while I do not agree with the vast majority of the actual political stances that Trump has taken, I do think that it's kind of like going to that personal development workshop or whatever and having that exercise that triggers everybody. And like only when people are really triggered and in it can we start to say, okay, like notice what just came up. Notice what actually just came up. In my feed on my Facebook, I got nothing but positivity, like people loving life and talking about manifestation and sharing beautiful videos that are inspiring, and that's great. And when Trump got elected, it was full of people, those same people saying, I can't believe I live with all you racist mother effers, and like I'm gonna move and I hate all of you and you're all terrible people. It was just crazy.
Yeah, pandemonium.
People lost it. They lost their minds. And how valuable to notice. I talk about this in my show, actually. And in San Francisco, I had this woman raise her hand and be like, that was totally me. Like, oh my gosh, it was totally me. And it's important to notice, wow, I can talk about and I can share inspiring, motivational memes all day. I think, do you call it memes in Australia?
Memes, I'm pretty sure it's memes.
It's memes. One of my Australian friends calls it memes, so I wasn't sure.
Someone I know calls it memes. That's my funniest one. I think we should all reclaim that and all call it.
So you share motivational, inspiring memes when things are going well, but the moment that something happens that is not what you wanted, all of a sudden you're calling people racist, you're finger pointing, you're spouting anger. That's a big deal. And that gets to be looked at because that was under the surface before. So that's my kind of overall meta view of it.
And it's been, so it has sparked activation, that you've noticed activation. You've noticed complacency lessen and action and proactivity rise.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely been a lot more action that I've seen. And I think that also it's a giant statement of, and even leading up to it, man, with what happened with Bernie Sanders and the Democratic National Committee, and like people got a real upfront view at how corrupt the system is and how
So
broken.
just break that down for me, because I don't quite understand what happened there exactly.
So basically, the DNC is what people thought, and it's not actually the case, but what people thought was you have these candidates running to be the Democratic candidate, right? And so you had Hillary running against Bernie, and they're going to go and be elected by the DNC. And what I thought, and what a lot of people thought, was they're kind of the neutral. They're just a platform, right? They're the neutral party that's just like observing what's going on and going to vote, and et cetera. Well, then what happened was these emails were leaked from the head of the DNC, or she didn't leak them, but they were leaked through like WikiLeaks or whatever. And the head of the DNC, this woman, was sending emails.
This was someone else? This was someone else, or this was Clinton?
This was not Clinton. This was the head of the DNC. I don't remember her name right now, but she was sending emails in which she was talking about essentially supporting Clinton and figuring out ways to make it more difficult for Bernie Sanders, and ways to not support him, and ways to not give him the platform. And it showed that the DNC was actively rooting for and working for one person, Hillary Clinton, and not the other one. And that was eye-opening. It's like, oh, great. And technically, legally, I think there wasn't anything legally wrong. It's just everyone was under the impression that they were supposed to be a neutral party. And that's a big deal, man. Like, that's a really big deal.
This is like you're voting for somebody who, in your mind, you believe your vote's going to go where it's what you've written down, but in reality, there's a bias in place in the system that you're voting toward, right?
Yeah, if there's a bias in the system, and there already is, we kind of know there is, but when it's that blatant, it causes people to go, "Whoa, this isn't right." And when people start to say this isn't right,
they go, "This is unethical."
They start to take action, right? Like that's a big deal, and that's the starting point. And I think that we're going to see some systemic change, because the people who wanted Bernie Sanders were heartbroken and angry about this, and then the people who really didn't want Trump were heartbroken and angry when Trump won. And so now you have just tens of millions of people who are just like, this system is messed up. We can't have this system anymore. And so I think we're going to see some systemic change over the coming years. And that would not have, in my opinion, wouldn't have happened. At least it wouldn't have happened as soon had Trump not won.
And have you seen, thanks for the breakdown, by the way, that paints a clearer picture for me of what actually went down there. And have you seen any success stories of that systemic change that you're mentioning, like in terms of cities, townships, eco-villages, this type of stuff, where that kind of change has come about? Have you witnessed any of that, or know anything about any of that?
Yeah, there are. There's been several elections on either a city or statewide levels where people have won who are not your typical candidate. They're not, like necessarily the lifelong politician, born and bred to be a politician kind of candidate.
This was just an upset and angry person who stood up.
Yeah, they've won on the heels of people realizing like we need something different. And I don't know the names of them. I just have seen some of them posted, and it hasn't been anywhere near me necessarily, but those are all really positive. I don't know. I'm not sure that our current political system, the way it's actually set up, is the way that we're going to find answers to our biggest problems. Because again, it's about the incentives, and there's very little incentive right now for a lot of those politicians to um, change the system because they're winning. The system works for them.
As in
And
they get to eat and their family gets to eat. And
yeah, even things like, for example, there's these kind of walkouts and strikes and blackouts that have happened in the government where like the politicians, the Democrats or the Republicans, they're like, we're just not participating. And right, they're getting paid, and they're getting paid tax dollars for that, right? They're implementing these healthcare laws, making it harder for certain people to get healthcare, and their families are on this epic healthcare, government healthcare stuff that they don't even have to worry or think about. What would happen if they had to go through the same exact process that the average American went through?
mm.
Like, what happens then? What happens when, George Bush famously was a draft dodger, right? Like, got out of going into the military. Like, what happens when that's not the case?
Mm.
What happens when it affects politicians the way that it affects the average American? Then things really shift.
When the playing field is actually level.
Yeah, because it's difficult for me to imagine these people. It costs so much money to become a politician, and president. Don't even get me started. Like, it costs so much money, millions of dollars. And so that's why so many of the politicians come from wealthy families who have been politicians or have had money in the family for generations. And because in many ways it's a luxury, right? Like, I don't know too many people who are working to make ends meet who are like, I want to make millions of dollars so I can run for a political office. And so
are there some people out there who you feel would do a really good job, or like if you put your hand up, what kind of shifts would you be looking at making?
Oh gosh. Listen, I would say that I have no interest in being or the president, but I do think that, for example, something that I would change immediately is I would have jobs that I think are really important, be jobs that people want to do and strive to do. First and foremost, teachers. My mom's a teacher, and it kills me to see my mom have to like create a budget of her personal income, even just to like buy supplies for her classroom. Like, that's crazy to me.
That doesn't make any sense, right?
And then like the public school system being funded by, the tax money of where they're located. And, so you have inner city schools that are operating with textbooks that are way too old and not even updated. So like, even if these kids where they're going to schools that have like single digit graduation rates are, even if they graduate, they're graduating with information that's a decade old just because the school can't afford an updated textbook. And this is the kind of thing where you have to kind of be an angel to want to teach. You know what I mean? You have to be willing to say, yeah, like, I'm not going to live a life of having a well-paying job, and I'm going to live a life where people kind of underappreciate me probably. And then if you want to go and teach in schools where they need the education the most, you're going to have very little support. Like, that system is broken. And so then you have people who are becoming teachers who should not be teaching our kids. They shouldn't. But the reason they're teaching our kids is because that's the job that they could get. And I'm not bashing on any teachers who love their jobs, who are great at their jobs, but all of us can Google right now videos that kids have taken on their cell phones of teachers who basically are refusing to teach and who you can tell just don't care because they're tenured. And because we have something called, the teachers union, which protects teachers who have been teaching long enough where they basically can't even be fired. And so they can check out and they're like, oh, I'm tenured, I'm good, I don't even need to worry about it. The system is broken. And so I think it starts by saying, okay, how do we create a system where our best and brightest want to be teachers? And then they teach our kids, and then we create this generational leaping forward. And how do we make it where our police officers are people who could have done anything, are so smart and so kind and so discerning, they have such great, that they could have done anything, and they're not power hungry racists. And that's not all police officers. So if you're a police officer, don't get upset, but like you don't have to go look too hard to see that there's a lot of racism and sexism and power hungry dynamics playing in our police force. And like, how do we incentivize people? Because right now I've heard police officers who've been in for a long time talk about how, back in, I don't know if it's the 60s or 70s or whatever, the police officers would patrol a neighborhood and they would know everybody, and people would like wave at, like they would be a part of the neighborhood and the community. And now when a cop comes around, and even that, we call them cops. Notice I said police officer, and then when I'm talking about it, now it's cops. And when a cop comes around, it's like, oh, like
the cortisol comes, the adrenaline comes.
It's like, I don't actually go, this person's here to help me. I go, is this person is this person looking at me like I'm going to do something wrong? Do I have to be extra careful? And that's a two-way street. And that's also because, dude, I've had LAPD officers who have shown up because they were taking out some of the girls that I knew out on a date, have shown up in a car that they've taken out of the police impound, drinking a bottle of Jack Daniels while pulling up. And
these are uniformed officers, or?
No, they're off duty. But because they're LAPD and they know if they get pulled over for drinking and driving or whatever, they're not going to get in trouble. That's an issue. It's a huge systemic issue. And so for me, if I was president, I would be hiring, because it's not me who's going to figure this out by myself. I would be hiring the best and the brightest and the most compassionate and the most loving people I knew or I could find. I would pay them super well or incentivize them in whatever way they wanted to be incentivized, and to create systems where they are a toroidal field of just self-generating positivity and growing organically in a really positive way.
Yeah, beautiful.
That's where I would start.
Beautiful.
And stop bombing other countries.
Stop fighting. It's like playground fighting, right?
It's just, dude, like 60% of my taxes, all of our taxes go to the defense budget here. It's crazy.
That's incredible. That's like thought creating reality. I'm thinking what you think is what you create. And if you're putting that much energy towards something, it might be lucrative monetarily, but I don't know how much damage it's going to cause.
They spent the program to design and build the F-22 or the F-25 or something fighter jet was over $1 trillion.
That's an unfathomable number.
It was over $1 trillion, that whole program, all the people, all the design, everything. And that's for one particular fighter jet. So there's other programs going for other fighter jets. It's like, how many fighter jets do we need? We already have more than every other country. So if I just said, I'm going to take that $1 trillion and put it all into education, I'm going to be able to pay.
Just as an experiment, just to see what happens.
You don't even have to do all of it, man. Just like, I'm going to take half of that. I'm going to take $500 billion and pump it into every school, all the teachers. It's insane what you would be able to do. And in one generation, like literally in one generation, we would see a massive shift. And I think that's important, because there are little boys and girls right now who could change the world if given the opportunity.
And I guess it's conversations like this because probably not going to be me. I'm probably not going to put my hand up, yourself. You have no interest yourself, but somebody will actually, I'm going to put in the yards, do what it needs to be done to reach that position and be that mold. I'll do what I need to do to get there. But when I get there, shit's going to change. I'm going to make these changes, So I think having these conversations and speaking about it is a beginning.
Totally. And the internet is the great equalizer, right? Like I don't know what the estimate is. Is it within the next decade or by 2020 or something, you're basically going to have like 90% of the world will have access to a smartphone and the internet. That is staggering. And I might be misquoting it, but it's some kind of staggering number like that. And I went to Tanzania to build some clean water wells a year and a half ago. And even in these remote villages, there's like one person who has a cell phone. There's like one person who has a cell phone. And that's only going to increase by now, like a year and a half later, there's more than one. And that means that I know, for example, I have Facebook friends. I volunteered at a refugee camp in Greece, and I have Facebook friends that I met who were refugees in that camp. And they have access to everything I am putting out. My podcast, this podcast, my podcast, The Deep Dive, they can access that. I put that out twice a week. They can listen to every single one completely free. They can watch all the videos I put out on Facebook or on Instagram. All of that is available to them. And that's the internet has changed the game. And we're seeing massive shifts already, and we're going to continue to see amazing shifts as more and more people get access to the internet, as long as we continue to use the internet as that tool intentionally.
Intention. Come back to intention. I guess we've got to wrap up soon. I know I got some stuff to do here, but it's been a pleasure connecting with you, learning a little bit about you, and I look forward to furthering the connection.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. This has been good. I feel like you got me in that flow zone, dude. You just got me, and I'm just like I'm going off on all these different subjects.
That's what we do, man. That's it. We create the space and allow it to flow to come. But just wanted to actually say on the intention, that intention piece for you. How important is intention? Because this is something that I work with a lot. Because when I teach, when I run a qigong class, when I have a session with a client, we set an intention, but then we let go of it. So we set the intention, and then it's like, all right, let's just let go and let the ether do what it wants to do with that intention. Yeah. So for you, how important is intention? And I guess what is some of your intention with the work that you do? I know that your deep dive, you have, it says, there's no rules in your podcast. It's kind of, but it still has an aim. It's like having that authentic look into the minds of the thought leaders. So, like the intention about your work that you're doing currently, and also how important is that space of also just letting go of the intention as well. Just talk to us a bit about intentionality.
So intention is the seed of creation. When we talk about without getting into religion specifically, but when we talk about creation from either the Big Bang or God, created light, sound, the word, right? Intention started it, right? If you believe that there's consciousness, and that's the difference. Like if you're one of those people who only believes in science without consciousness, let's say, and say the Big Bang doesn't have any consciousness involved in it, well then, yeah, it's a different discussion. But if you're someone who believes that there is some sort of consciousness that pervades all of existence, well then intention is the seed of it all. Intention is the seed of everything that will show up in my experience, because it's showing up in my experience as a result of some sort of intention I'm holding consciously or unconsciously. Letting go is absolutely a crucial piece of this. And it's funny that we just mentioned my podcast, The Deep Dive. There's actually an episode called embodiment, and the trickiest part of manifestation. So if anyone's listening to this, I really break this down in much more detail. But the trickiest part of manifestation is letting it go, because when you are intending something, when you actually are consciously trying to manifest something, inherent in that process is the knowing that you don't have it yet. And so manifestation works by believing it's already there and believing it so firmly that it shows up in your experience. It has to match that frequency. So if you don't ever let it go, you're actually only ever holding on to a vision, an intention of where you don't have it yet. And so it's a crucial step, and one that's often overlooked, and one that's trickier. You know, I say simple, but not easy. And so, yeah, that's a huge part of that. And so I'm glad that you touched on it. And as far as my intentions, my intention is to remind people that they are seen, heard, and loved. That is the foundation of everything I do in all the ways that I do them, because I believe that any issue that we are seeing in an individual that's then manifesting in the collective is the result of someone that doesn't feel those three things. They don't feel seen by the world or by the people around them. They don't feel heard, like their voice matters. They don't feel heard, and they don't feel loved. And, you know, hurt people hurt people. And so that's a big thing for me, because I also recognize how powerful of a shift I've had in my own life. My father is a stoic Asian man who never showed emotions, and I felt very unsafe to show my own emotional experience, and that caused me to really shut down, and I had to learn how to feel. But since doing that, since actually feeling seen and heard and loved, my life has become so much fun and so joyful and just so exciting. And if it's possible for me, it's possible for anyone. That's what I believe. And that's what drives me.
Yeah, beautiful. I can relate to that too. You know, and if it's possible for me, that piece, if it's possible for me, it's possible for anyone to enjoy life and to not take, like, you know, to take the cards you were dealt and not be like, well, this is the way things are. To be able to choose the meaning and the path ahead, you know, actually be able to consciously choose that, not to go, oh, well, that's the way I am, or that's the way things are. You know, if I can do that, anyone can do it with what I've been through as well. Anyone can go see my stories on my online. Won't go into it now, but you know, it's it's definitely, I know that piece. And when you said, if I could do it, I totally can relate to that.
And that's why it's so important that you're doing what you're doing, man. You're like, you will resonate with people because they see that in you and they can see themselves in you. And when someone like you is sharing your story and creating magic with like this podcast and all the other stuff, work that you do, it's like, wow, okay, that's possible. You're expanding what people think is possible, and that's huge. It's important. So thank you.
That's my pleasure, and thank you. It's lovely to connect it. I do, if you got a few more minutes now, I just got one last little piece that wants to come through here.
Okay.
The piece that wants to come through is around masculinity and femininity. And in terms of, what, I don't necessarily know what I'm asking, but just what's been your experience of these two aspects? And especially, you brought up your father, you brought up that feeling, you brought up, allowing yourself to feel. What has been your journey with that? And what would you, I guess, feel has been beneficial for you and others that you've seen really connecting with both of these aspects?
This is a big topic that we will not get to in the next 5 minutes, but I will do my best. What I think they're the most important pieces, because I've done a pretty deep dive into this. I've gone on a path of sexual healing and really working on the trauma of being a male in today's society, and then also my girlfriend going through it and working through her trauma around being a female, and recognizing that we all have masculine energy and we all have feminine energy. We all have a masculine, feminine in us. And so what you're seeing right now is a rise of the divine feminine across the planet. You're seeing this rise. And in many ways, that rise is still being done in an old paradigm way. So what I mean by that is, yes, there's a rise of the divine feminine, and it doesn't need to be done the way that the masculine has done it. It doesn't need to be done as angry, violent, yelling, etc. There's another way that it can be done. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I think it's important that we don't fall into the trap of turning a beautiful movement and a beautiful rising into something that carries an energy that people are scared of, or that people, and what you're seeing right now is a vilification of the masculine. So the rise of the feminine is beautiful. Does it need to go hand in hand with a vilification of the masculine? Yes, masculine, and not just men, but the masculine has overdone it and has repressed the feminine and has created a lot of problems and a lot of issues and caused a lot of pain. And that is not something that should be taken lightly. And the answer is not, well, now let's punish men. It's not, let's vilify men, because vilifying the masculine is vilifying a part inside all of us. And suppressing the feminine is suppressing a part in all of us. When I was raised, and when I say like it wasn't safe to feel, my feminine was suppressed. My feeling, my creative, that was suppressed in those moments. And then like now I tell this story. I went on tour in Australia, and there was open mic that we attended. And while we were at this open mic event, it was kind of like a party in this warehouse. And so there were people talking and eating. And then at a certain point they said, okay, now we're going to have artists come on stage. But because it was also a party, people were talking. And so like the first person was this girl, and she went up and she had this beautiful music, singer, songwriter. And at the end, she had done like 3 songs. And she said, she got kind of upset, and she was like, hey, this is very vulnerable for people to share. And so it would be great if people could stop talking and give some attention for the next people who are coming up here. And you could tell she was upset. And I had met her beforehand, and I was really excited to hear her music, and I thought she was great. And I came up behind her, like she was talking to a friend. I came up behind her after she came off stage, and I just gave her a hug, and I looked around at her shoulder like this, and I just said, hey, I want you to know that I thought you were great. And that was it. And I walked away. And as I walked away, I thought, did I just do something wrong? Like I hugged this girl who I just met. I hugged her from behind. I didn't ask her permission. Like the line, maybe I made her feel unsafe. Like who knows? I never would have thought that before. Right? And maybe that's a good thing that I'm thinking about it. But I do know that I didn't know what there was a part of me that felt like maybe I shouldn't have done that. And all I wanted to do was make her feel seen, heard, and loved. And so when we start to get to this balance point where I may shut down my willingness to just shower someone with pure like love and appreciation, when that's getting shut down out of fear, then that's a sign for me that there's something, like maybe it's going too far. I don't know, but it's something to be aware of. And I think it should be a part of the conversation for sure.
100%. Yeah, it's a big, deep one. Maybe we continue that on the next episode.
Round 2.
Just before we go, something that's been in my mind the whole time I've been sitting here is, tell me about the Slinky Effect.
Yeah, the Slinky Effect is a company that I started with my girlfriend, who we've been together almost 9.5 years now. That's right. And it's how we describe healthy relationships. And this is not just romantic relationships. This is friendships, business partnerships, your relationship with the universe. Basically, you're 2 ends of a slinky. And what happens is one person can have some sort of catalyst for growth, and they should grow. Maybe they listen to a podcast, they take a workshop, they have a plant medicine ceremony, or they read a certain book, but they grow. And what happens is they generally will leapfrog the other person because they're growing in a way that that other person may not have ever done before. And now what happens is the other end of the Slinky has a choice. Do I choose to allow this person's momentum to carry me into my own growth? So I see that she's grown in this area of intimacy. Amazing. Am I going to grow in this area of intimacy and masculine? And maybe I'm going to research other things. I could do that. If I don't do that, and she keeps growing, eventually it becomes like a Slinky with tension growing until it becomes like a ball and chain where one person's just dragging the other one along, or it snaps, it breaks, and that's it. That's the end of the relationship. And so a healthy relationship is one where both parties are just pulling each other forward over and over, one growth catalyst at a time.
Beautiful. Awesome. And on that note, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing. That one peaked, you know, the interest was peaked, and now it's satiated.
Yeah.
Thank you
Awesome,
so much.
man.
I look forward to connecting more, and I'll share some of the links that you mentioned as well. So flick through. There was a link you mentioned that we can find something, but I'll find it and ask you exactly what it was at a later date.
Totally.
Yeah, have an amazing evening, and hopefully.
Thank you very much for having me on, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone who's taken the time. I really don't take it lightly that people could spend their time however they choose. And if they've listened to, you know, an hour plus of this, that's really awesome. And I feel very honored. If they want any more of what I'm putting out there, I have my podcast, or follow me on Facebook or Instagram. And yeah, I very much appreciate what you're doing, brother. So thank you for having me.
Likewise, it's an honor to have you on, and definitely look forward to connecting more in the future. Thank you. Thanks to everyone who's been tuning in, and until next time, guys, keep the flow growing and the growth flowing.